Welcome, welcome to the Dharma Masterclass series on the teachings of oneness. I'm Niko Ana, and I'm so pleased to have you here today as we continue this beautiful conversation exploring the concepts of oneness and how these ancient spiritual teachings can apply to our current modern day life. And what does it mean to be on the spiritual path, a personal spiritual path? What does it mean? And how can we resolve the dichotomy of oneness and being a separate self and appearing to be this separate body walking around on the planet with all these other bodies around us? How can we resolve this apparent dichotomy of being? So before we jump into our topic today, I'm going to have us just take a nice deep breath together. If you want to close your eyes and place your hands over your heart, that feels good to you and you're able to do that while you're listening. Take a deep breath. Exhale slowly. Tune into your heart center. And really just start to drop out of your thinking mind and drop into the wisdom of the heart center. Just feeling into it. Feel the spaciousness. Inside your body. And feel the spaciousness outside your body. Imagine that you are actually breathing in and out through your heart center now. And as you do this, I'm going to invite you to picture the face of someone that you love deeply in your mind. Someone you care for so much that as soon as you think of them, you get a smile on your lips. And just send a beam of love out of your heart to their heart. Allowing that feeling of love to grow and magnify in your heart center. You might even be able to feel it coming back to you. And just allow this feeling to move out through your whole body and maybe even beyond your physical body into your energy field, into the environment that you're in. Maybe even out into the whole world. You can send it way out into the universe. Feeling connected to everyone and everything in the universe through this love, this energy of love. Good. And just breathing slow, deep breaths. Start to bring your awareness back into your environment just by noticing the surface that you're sitting on. Just feeling that, maybe placing your hands on the surface or touching your hands to wherever it is you're sitting or lying back. If your eyes were closed, go ahead and start opening them slowly. Just let your focus be soft as you open your eyes. And look around the environment that you're in and just focus on an object. Let's pick a square object. We'll just focus on one square object that you can find in your environment and just let that object bring you back into this moment. Look at its color, its texture. Anything else you might notice? Good. And then if you feel like stretching your arms up to the sky and reach your fingertips out, stretch them out and look up. And come back to center. Very nice. Okay, let's just feel into the shift that may have occurred in you between before you did this exercise and now. Just noticing anything that you can. Maybe you feel more at ease. Maybe you feel more steady or calm. So it's just important to just notice if you did get a shift and just to acknowledge it. So we're talking today about the concept of the inner guide or leader and the outer guru. And this is something that I think is a really important topic, especially just in that recently in the world that we live in, and particularly, I'll just say in the nation that I live in, which is the United States, there's been a lot of political upheaval. And I know there's political upheaval in the whole world. But I'm just going to go ahead and refer to the political upheaval that I'm currently familiar with. And so it brings up the idea of leadership, right? We talk about this a lot. This is a big topic on people's minds, and there's a big discussion going on in many different forums about leaders and people being concerned about having good leadership. And everyone's got a different opinion about it. You know, some people think this one person's a good leader. Some people think they're not. You know, there's just a lot of talk, but I'm not here really to talk about a debate around who is or isn't a good leader, because what I'm going to steer you towards is actually the inner leader, you know, the inner guru. And you can think of leadership as many different things because there are all types of leadership in our life. So we have leadership at top levels of our government, of our institutions, our organizations. We have family leadership. We have ourselves. We have to lead ourselves, or at least we hope we do. We have religious leadership. You know, this is a series about personal spiritual development. So we'll talk about religious leadership or even spiritual leadership that's not necessarily religious. So you've got different subsets. You've got actual religious, organized religion, and there's leadership within those groups. And then you also have spiritual organizations that aren't necessarily affiliated with one particular religion or another, but might be affiliated with a particular type of spirituality. But there's always going to be leaders or people who are in charge of or in control of information in these organizations at many different levels. So the question that we're looking at is, how do we balance the inner leader or guru with the outer leader or guru in our life? How do we do that? You know, we typically are taught to really focus on our outer world in life, right? That's just how we're raised. And we are always paying attention to the outer world because we're looking out for our survival. And human beings historically, I mean, we're social beings, and we are programmed to be in organizations, to be in communities, to be in a group. We're social beings. And within groups, there always has to be leaders. Everyone can't be a leader, right? That would be chaos. But if you have nothing but followers, that's also chaos too. And leaders have to be able to balance times when they lead and times when they follow. Everyone does, whether you're a leader or not. The truth is that you have to learn how to lead yourself sometimes before you can lead others. And you have to know when to listen to your own guidance and even possibly override the guidance of someone on the outside of you that even might be considered an authority or someone you look up to or a mentor even. So this can be a concern that comes up in a lot of spiritual paths where there is a distinct leader. There is a teacher or a leader or a guru that is teaching something specific. And many people will look to this person for guidance on many levels of their life. And they can get a lot of benefit. And there's a lot of really, truly high level spiritual teachers in the world that are helpful and that are ethical and that are dedicated to their own personal development as well as other people around them. And they're balanced, mentally, emotionally balanced people. And then there's also people who are in positions of power and leadership that aren't mentally and emotionally balanced and still somehow are in those positions and can wield influence over us. And so we have to know when we can trust ourselves, right? Which is always, when do we trust ourselves? When do we listen to our own guidance that overrides the guidance of something on the outside that even might be told to us as the end all be all authority about things? And so my answer to the question is that the truth is that we always have to answer to our inner guidance first, okay? We have to answer to that inner guidance. And many times when we're challenged by the outer world, and the outer world is telling us something that we intuitively know isn't right for us, there becomes a conflict comes up in our being, because here we are, we're human beings, we're spiritual beings in a human body having a human experience, and we have primal programming, we have a primal brain that tells us that we have to cooperate with the group in order to survive. And this is in our DNA. This is literally programmed to our DNA still today. And so we feel this conflict come up because our primal brain, our DNA is telling us, don't go against the group. Don't make waves, don't cause problems or conflict in the group because you need the group to survive. And it's not really intellectual, but it's a feeling. It's a feeling that comes up in us, and the body does not lie. Okay? You can tell yourself all day long, oh, I don't care what they think, or I don't need them, but your body is saying something completely different. It's scared. It's threatened by the idea that you could get thrown out of the group. You could get, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, you could get exiled. You could get ostracized, right? You could get cut off from your resources. This is what your primal brain is perceiving. It's very threatening. And so even though your intellect might be saying, well, I don't actually really there's no actual threat to my survival by listening to my inner guidance and maybe going against what someone else on the outside is saying, but your body is fighting you. And this is so common. This is such a common thing that comes up for us as a species. This is why we go along with racial prejudice. This is why we go along with biases that come up in our world, even if we don't necessarily believe in them. There are some people who go along with it because they're afraid not to, And so I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this is why people do this. This is why people go along with things that we know in our soul aren't right. This is why we treat other human beings like they're less than. And this is why we have atrocities that happen in the world, like concentration camps and all the other things that can happen, that have happened in the past and maybe still are happening now. But we can only do so much. We have to start with ourselves. We have to start with ourselves. And if it makes you feel any better, you can think about the past, okay? If you're in a conflict and you need to stand up for yourself, you need to follow your inner guidance. Your inner guru is saying, this is what I need. And it's in conflict with something in your outer world that is an authority in your outer world. Whether it's a family member, a religious figure, a boss, corporate figure, a political figure, doesn't matter, okay? No matter who it is. When this conflict comes up in you, I want you to think about what it was like in the past, maybe in a time when, like, I'm going to use a story. One of the teachers that I've studied in Buddhism, his name is Shinran Shonin, and he's the founder of Shin Buddhism, or at least he was the teacher that teachings were founded upon. And he lived in the 1400s in Japan. And he was, at the time, considered very radical for what he was teaching. And so it's funny because when I tell you what he was teaching, you're probably going to laugh and think, well, that's not really that radical. But at the time, it was. And he was exiled for it. And so at the time, in the system that was in place there, they had monks, they had Buddhist monks, and then they had what you would call like lay people or householders, people who weren't monks, who hadn't taken vows, and people who were living regular lives, had families and jobs and things like that. So we really had this pretty big division between these two types of people, monks and lay people, okay? So the monks' jobs were to go into, their training and learn and meditate and do all the things they did, and then they would hold a space for the lay people, and then the lay people were responsible for taking care of the monks. So they would feed the monks, they would give donations to the temples, they would basically sustain the monks so the monks could continue the spiritual practice. And then the idea is that the lay people are getting the spiritual benefit from the monks' practice. But lay people didn't typically do their own practices. They relied on this system, the monk system. They relied on that instead of doing it themselves. Now, this is a very general story, so you might hear some different versions of this history, but this is my interpretation of it. So Shinran Shonin, he came along, he actually went into the temple to become a monk at the age of, I think, 7 or 8. He was very, very young. And very, I guess, spiritually advanced at that age, that it was even recognized by his family that he was someone who was very spiritual. And so he actually chose to go to the monastery to become a monk at that age. So when he started teaching in his early 20s, I think it was in his early 20s, and he had his own teacher named Honen Shonin. He would actually go and teach lay people, okay? He would teach lay people something that he told them that could free them spiritually by simply uttering a mantra, which is actually Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu, which is the name of Amida Buddha, which is the Buddha that is embodied in Shin Buddhism. Okay, so don't worry too much about the actual, teachings of Amida Buddha, but the point of the story is that he had this mantra that basically was the name of Amida Buddha, and he told the people at the time that all they had to do to save themselves and to become spiritually advanced and move into the next life after they died, to be going into a more spiritually advanced realm, was to just chant this name over and over every day. And that's all they had to do. And so this was a really huge controversial thing, because what was happening is that he was basically giving these people power, saying, you can save yourself, you can do this practice, you're allowed to do this practice and actually get the benefit from it directly from your own practice rather than relying on monks. And he was empowering people spiritually. And he got in a lot of trouble for this. And, you know, he actually at some point got exiled from the city that he lived in. And he was put way out in some, I think it was the northern province. And all I know and remember from the story is that it was very bitterly cold there and far away from the city. So it was a very harsh life. And he lived in a little shack up in this northern province that was very, very cold and just not very pleasant. Assuming that the city he lived in before was more pleasant and warm, and there was you know, community there to support him. So he was exiled for teaching the Nambutsu. This is what it's called, the Nambutsu. Interestingly enough, though, he actually continued to write and teach, and people would come and see him, and he actually ended up marrying someone and having a family. He just went on with his life, and he just kept teaching, and he kept doing what he was doing, and then his son ended up bringing his teachings forward, and a religion was formed around his teachings. So the teachings ended up coming through anyway, and he didn't stop just because he was exiled. Okay, guys, so think about it. Okay, think about that. So this man was exiled, this spiritual leader was exiled for basically telling people that you can have your own personal power in your own spiritual development. Right? Does that sound radical to you now? I mean, right now in the world we live in, does it seem radical to tell someone, you can chant this mantra, you know, and you'll be spiritually freed, or you'll feel good about yourself, or you'll get some benefit? That doesn't seem radical now, because think of all the ways in which we're empowered now in our society to find our own personal path. We could go to classes, yoga classes, right? We can practice yoga, anyone can. We can take courses online or in person. We can go to any church we want, right? You can pick anything. You can go to any church, any spiritual organization, community centers. There is just so many ways that you can follow a personal spiritual path. And again, I live in the US, so I can only speak from my own personal experiences, that I know that I'm free, completely free to pursue any path I want spiritually and religiously in this country. Now that may not be true in all countries, but it's true for me. It's true in many countries. So again, you think about how different it is now from a time when Shinran Shonin was alive. And it might make it a little easier for you to stand up for yourself and follow your own inner guidance. Because you think about how, if you still are feeling that threat to your survival, think about, is it really actually true? Okay, now Shinran Shonin didn't get executed, but I'm sure there were some people who got executed for something similar back then. Shinran Shonin only got exiled. But our bodies are telling us we're going to get executed. That is what our bodies are telling us. That's why we're so scared to stand up for ourselves. We've got to ask ourselves in a moment, am I actually really in any danger here? Is there any real danger? Physically, mentally, or emotionally? And even if there is it worth it to subjugate my own inner knowing to not follow what I know to be right and true for me in order to comply with whatever authority is out there that I'm afraid of? Is it worth it? Now you have to answer that question for yourself. Maybe it is. There might be times in your life when it is worth it to subjugate your own inner guidance because of a fear for something happening to your body. But I got to tell you, most of the time, for most of us, the fear is completely unfounded. It's not real. It's rooted in primal DNA and the primal brain, and it is only a response, and it's not an actual real threat most of the time, 99% of the time. And so what you'll find is that if you're able to stand up for yourself that one time, just that one time where you just draw a line in the sand and you stand up to whatever authority it is you're perceiving in your life, and you say, I'm going to follow my path. You may not even have to say someone else is wrong in order to follow your path. You might even be able to just say, this is right for me. I know what's right for me. My inner guru, my inner leader that is connected to the divine wisdom of the source of all life, whatever that is for you, whatever word you use, knows what is right for me. And you can feel it in every fiber of your being, because you also know what it feels like to go along with something that isn't right for you. You can also feel that in every fiber of your being. You can feel it that it is not right for you, and it feels awful. And if you continue to do this over time, it's going to take a toll on you. It's going to take a toll on your health, mental, physical, emotional, and it's going to manifest in some area of your life as suffering. But when you can just stand up that one time, that first time, because there'll be many times after that, but if you can draw a line in the sand and you can say to yourself, that's it. This is the moment where I'm going to stand up for myself. And if you can just do it, even if you're afraid, do it anyway. And then when you find that nothing bad actually really happens, maybe there's an unpleasant interaction with someone, but if you stand your ground and you stay in your center and you stay emotionally regulated, when that passes, you will feel so good about standing your ground and having boundaries and following your inner guidance. You'll feel so successful that you'll want to do it again and again and again, because it'll start to result in your life getting better. It'll start to result in your potential opening up and opportunities that you didn't realize you could ever even have start coming into your life. And you start experiencing more fulfillment and joy and trusting yourself, trusting life. And it's just such an incredible feeling. Now, does that mean that you'll never feel fear again? No, of course not. Every time you come up against a choice that you might need to make, where you might have to override someone else in order to follow your own guidance, you may feel fear on some level. But the trick is to know that the fear is just, again, part of the primal brain. The fear is just something to observe and to take note of, and then to move right through it. And you get really good at it. And you have tools that you can use to help you move through the fear, like meditation or EFT tapping or whatever you use. Exercise, anything to interrupt a pattern in your physiology, which is all fear is chemicals released by the brain that create a certain physiology that you react to. That's all fear is. It's neurochemistry. Bottom line. And when we learn how to control our neurochemistry, we can control our fear response. So how, again, do we resolve the inner guru leader and the outer guru leader? One step at a time, one situation at a time. You just make a choice in yourself that I'm going to choose to trust myself now. I'm going to choose it. That doesn't mean that you won't ever possibly follow the guidance of someone else on the outside world. At some point, you will. There will be times in your life when the guidance that you are getting in the outside world from others is right for you. And there might even be times when what you thought was right for you perhaps isn't, and you'll discover that. You might say, oh, I feel like I should do this, and then you explore it, and maybe you get some feedback from someone else, and then you change your mind based on that feedback. You decide, you know what, this person really is right about this. This thing that I thought I needed to do, that really was based on my own fear, or that was a perspective that I can shift now. I can see something else, I can see a different picture, and I can make a different choice. So it's really about balancing those worlds, and it's about trusting yourself. And if you want to talk about how to apply oneness to this, if you truly believe that we're all connected and we're all just drops of water that came from the same ocean, then we can trust that there are times when guidance comes from the outside, that it's really ourselves talking to us through this outer world. It's guidance coming through an external pathway that we are hearing in our outer world. It's actually our own voice. It's our own voice talking to us. And this is truly how oneness works. So you can contemplate that, and then you can also practice it. You can practice the art of balancing your inner guidance with the outer world. And it is a lifelong practice. It's a lifelong practice, and it is something that you can get really good at. Whether you make mistakes or not, whether sometimes you might fail, doesn't change the fact that as you practice it, you get better and better at it, because failure is part of life. We have a tendency to think that failure means something bad, that failure means, oh, you're bad at this, or you shouldn't do this anymore. But that's not true. Actually, failure is part of success. You cannot actually achieve success without having some failures, because within a failure is a lesson on how to do something different, how to get a different result. And we tend to not listen to our inner guidance because of an extreme fear of failure, right? Which leads to the threat of being exiled from the group or whatever we're perceiving. So we have to override that fear of failure and just take a chance and trust ourselves. And that is the path. That's the path of personal spiritual development. And I'm just so glad that you joined me today. And I'm so pleased to share this series with you guys. And if you're still listening, whoever is still listening, thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing this journey with me. I really, really appreciate it. So why don't we just take a community breath together now? Put your hands over your heart if you're able to. You can just feel the energy of everyone being connected right now in this moment, whatever moment you're in. Tuning into your heart center once again. If you'd like to say this affirmation with me, or just let these words be your own. I'm going to repeat this affirmation 3 times. I choose to let it be safe, to trust my inner leader. I choose to let it be safe, to trust my inner guru. I choose to let it be safe, to trust my inner guidance. Namaste, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining me. And I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day. Namaste, my friends.